the planets and their influences, the Lord of the Day, the natural astrology, which confined itself to explaining the atmospheric variations, has become meteorology, the cosmogonic astrology, which studied the stars solely from the physical point of view, nature, course, etc., has become astronomy. It is horoscopic astrology alone which concerns us here. 1. Its object is the study of astral influences. Let us study its various elements without further delay. We shall then come to the practical conclusions based on these data, namely the divination, or rather the expectation of a destiny, by means of casting the horoscope. One we had intended for a moment using the word astromancy, suggesting to our colleagues in this beautiful and curious art that it was preferable to that of astrology. Besides Zeely Star and others have used it. It is more logical and just as harmonious. Our reason was as follows. While it was the initial knowledge of the stars, the word astrology, astron, star, logos, word, was excellent, since it described the total of the knowledge of the sky. But since today astrology has given birth to other well-defined sciences, viz., astronomy and meteorology, it now forms but a part of the old general science, namely that special science relating to the divination of character and of fate by means of the stars, and therefore it ought to be called astromancy, astron, star, mantir, divination. We have, however, through modesty not yielded to the temptation. If the word is the right one, it will come into use by itself. The reasons for believing in astral influences have been supplied. But what are these influences? Tradition is going to show them to us, and first as regards the 7 planets. 1. Let us remember that in astrology the name of Lord of the Day is given to each of the stars which governs with its influence a day of 24 hours. In other words, the ancients believed that the stars each in their turn governing one day of the week were: for Sunday, the sun; for Monday, the moon; for Tuesday, Mars; for Wednesday, Mercury; for Thursday, Jupiter; for Friday, Venus; for Saturday, Saturn. They also believed that where one or other of the parents belongs to a particularly well-defined type, it is possible that through sympathetic harmony, birth may be advanced or delayed, so that it may take place at the time of the predominance of the ruling star. They believe that we have a certain character, not only because we are born under this or that sky, but that we are born under a particular sky because we have a certain atavistic character sketched out during gestation. The astral influences of the moment of birth sum up the atavistic astral influences, those which ruled during gestation, and those which will rule during life. R. Schwabach. It had in fact been noticed that frequently a son is born under a sky not dissimilar from that of his father. Whence family likenesses. 8. Let us add, therefore, for the benefit of those who in all logic will want to add to the influence of the Lord of the day of birth the influence of the Lord of the day of conception, that astrology enables them to do so in the following manner. The principle on which the sidereal forces react on the newborn child, impressing on it both a physical and a moral stamp, thus forming its character and its destiny, is found in the woman, the mother. Since it reacts in a sure fashion on the menstrual flow, it also obviously reacts on the pregnancy. It is therefore possible to prepare a natal horoscope by means of a prenatal horoscope. Now it seems settled that the conceptional life consists of 3 stages. Conception, the 7th month when the fetus acquires a life of its own, and the moment of birth. Taking as basis the data which the German astrologer, Glaser, 1. 2 others have been discovered, but possibly just because of their distance their influence is less. They have only to be studied. It will also be observed that the word planet is here applied also to the star the sun and to the satellite the moon. Simple question of vocabulary. The sun and the moon were mainly called the two luminaries. Further note, it is well known that in the Kabbalah a special number was given to each planet. It is very odd to note that these numbers begin with 3 Saturn and end with 9 the moon. The numbers 1 and 2 are not used, and correspond with the 2 planets then unknown, but perhaps guessed at. The other numbers are 4, Jupiter, 5, Mars, 6, the Sun, 7, Venus, 8, Mercury. 1. In this connection we might have to criticize at length the law of astral heredity, so dear to the great astrologer Paul Korasnud claims to have found in Egyptian inscriptions which reveal the method in this connection of the priest of Apis named Har-Momri. We shall be able to draw up a scheme for each of these 3 stages capable of being united into one threefold whole. However, as the exact date of conception is not always known, it will be sufficient to observe the general magnetic state of the sky during the 9th month preceding the birth during an approximate period of 10 days. In this manner we shall obtain the lord of the sign and the lord of the decanus, as to which we shall presently give the necessary explanations. Let us now pass on to the description of the general influence of each of the 7 planets, remembering that it will always be more or less modified by other influences which we shall study subsequently. The Sun. This is the luminous half of the universe, the source of heat, the emblem of wisdom and of will. It is youth and its ardor, its impetuosity and its generosity. It is life and its generative power. It is Apollo on his fiery chariot. It was the star of Agamemnon, of Alexander, of Raphael, of Molière. The Solarian one is generally of medium height, well made, of lemon coloring mixed with red. 2. His face is oval, his beard full, his hair auburn or golden. 3. His forehead prominent, his eye limpid, stern without unkindness. His cheeks are firm and fleshy. His nose is thin and straight. His eyebrows are well arched. His mouth large and thick-lipped. His hips slender. His limbs thin. His gait noble. His body running more to muscle than to fat. The true Apollonian sign manual makes benevolent, proud, somewhat ambitious, cheerful, intelligent, qualified for command, wealth, celebrity, or at any rate for a brilliant position. It produces the intuitive, the inventor, the acute and keen-sighted who nonetheless are seduced by beauty, loving decoration, state, the arts and literature. Those who, born under this beneficent influence, wish to accentuate it, will prefer the color white, take the chrysolite as their talismanic stone. Gold will be their metal, the lion their animal, saffron their scent. They will give honor to the vine and the laurel. For one, we deal here, as in the case of the other planets, with the description of an almost single influence, which never occurs. No solar type, Saturnian or other, is pure. But the solar, Saturnian, or other dominance may be very clearly marked. Asterix Desbaroles, in speaking of the color of the complexion in the different planetary types, always stresses it, giving it thus an importance which we mention in passing. One reservation on this point. The auburn color of the hair, formerly frequent, has yielded place first to fair hair, then to brown. The number of the brown head increases without ceasing. This important observation is not to be found in any of the books which we have perused. For as may be guessed, these symbols are akin to magic, which will be studied later on, but they are found in all books dealing with traditional astrology. The scientists disdain them. All the same, we have thought well to mention them by way of record. But there are shadows in this table. The Solarians run the risk of seeing their pride change into insufferable arrogance, their ambition into folly of grandeur, their talk into chatter, their elegance into eccentricity, their golden complexion into dull yellow. Their eyes may become weakened and veiled, their hearts suffer palpitations. They will dread death by fire. Their home is sometimes unhappy, their children ungrateful. If they wish to avoid many disappointments, they will do well to remain lonely. The moon. It has always been looked upon, even in literatures totally unconnected with the occult sciences, as the star of dreaminess, the golden muse of imagination and also of hallucination. Does not peer rosing forever to the moon of his unrequited love? Merely by casting on us its magnetism, the queen of the night would seem to be maleficent. It turns its sons into fantastic and changeable beings, those lunatics of whom we have all met specimens, people incapable of initiative, listless, apathetic, undecided. Imaginative, yes, but always following a new desire. They would like to spend their lives traveling. They are whimsical. The Selenians appear to be nervous, inclined to paralysis, to strabismus, to diseases of the brain. It is amongst them that the largest number of insane and neurotics is found, but for this same reason inclined to somnambulism, to magnetism, to hypnosis. Many are dreamers, visionaries. Very few become orators. The bad lunatypes are lazy, drunkards, egoistical, liars and false. Tradition shows the well-defined Selenian to have dull fair hair, head round, complexion pale, the eye weak or inattentive, the nose short and rounded, the temples wide. 1. It is in the main true that their face is usually astonished, melancholy, their flesh flabby, their body stout, their gait and shoe, their limbs thick, their movements timid, their lips fleshy, their mouth bitter and small. Poets, fishers, sailors belong to this planetary type whose lucky metal is silver, their color green, their talisman the pearl, the opal or selenite, their animal the ass, their plant rather narcotic the poppy, the buttercup or the tulip, their perfume amber. If painters, says J. Grand Pré, they will produce landscapes flooded with twilight. If musicians, nocturnes and fantastic symphonies. If writers, mysterious or fanciful novels. Corrected by Venus, they may become remarkable, as witness Théophile Gautier. Mars. Hostile planet because it is the nearest to us. And unchaining catastrophes, according to the ancients, such as wars, one the head round, wide above the temples where the organ of imagination is situate. The upper part of the forehead, wherein phrenology, causality, and comparison are situate, is not very prominent, but that part of the skull which is near the eyes and gives qualities of perception projects much des Barreaulis. Revolutions, tempests, earthquakes. Star of wrath and brutality, but also of initiative and will. Mars is the lord of fire, the protector of the soldier, the god of war makers, of men inclined to fury and to violent sensuality. The Martians, if they are subject to beneficent influences, are, however, able to transform these dangerous instincts into qualities, be merely self-willed, energetic, tenacious, enduring, loyal, even heroes. The persons bearing the sign manual of this planet, says Enigma 1, have a robust constitution, a manly appearance. Their hair is generally black or tawny, their glance quick and hard, their jaw large, their cheekbones prominent. Their gestures are quick, daring, and they walk quickly. The complexion of the Martian is swarthy, his nose bony and arched, his chin square, his temperament bilious. In the upper classes, the subjects of this planet become surgeons, dentists, lawyers, generals, explorers, hunters. In the lower classes, they become metallurgists, smiths, blacksmiths, quarriers, miners, butchers, hangmen, gunsmiths, soldiers, barbers, etc. The Martians die fairly young and often of a violent death. They are subject to accidents, to blows, to wounds, to inflammations. Few of them become rich, for they have no foresight. Their correspondences are, in the animal kingdom, the wolf; in the mineral, iron; in the vegetable, absinthe. Their color yellow, their stone the amethyst, their perfume garlic. Their chief characteristics, the face and muscles. Illnesses, hysteria, erethism, irritation of the tissues. Mars allied to Saturn gave their impetuous qualities to Michelangelo and to Leonardo da Vinci. Allied to Venus, it dominated Horace Vernet. Caravaggio was a thorough Martian. In Julius Caesar were combined Mars and Jupiter. It was exaggerated Martianism which was responsible for the fiery complexion of Catilina, of Cassandra, of Caesar Borgia. To Mercury, he was the messenger of the gods. Intelligence, science, eloquence, inventiveness, movement, mental and physical activity. This is his charm, in addition fertilized to some extent by surrounding influences. The Mercurian is thus dexterous, intuitive, subtle, a good or smart speaker who can use his tongue either for good in the making of great speeches, for the defense of just causes, or for evil in order to deceive the masses, betray, cajole, slander. They have by principle grace and lightness, an indefatigable and prolonged youthfulness of soul, a sympathetic manner. They are simple, adapt themselves to events, have varied abilities. Toward destiny, according to Desbarolles, following Porter's Humana Physiognomia. Mercurians become scholars, philosophers, geometers, doctors, postmen, grooms, commercial travelers, able merchants and industrials, lawyers and diplomats, comedians and dancers, and also, unfortunately, thieves, spies, forgers. The Mercurian is generally small, with a long face, a complexion like new honey, forehead high and prominent, rarely a beard, eyes deep set, very mobile, brilliant and crafty, the lips thin, the chin pointed, big shoulders and broad chest, the limbs both strong and thin, the voice weak. 1. They have, in the upper classes, quick and piercing thought, great love for sciences and arts. Saturn and Mercury united sometimes produce genius. The good influence of Mercury inclines towards real superiority, sobriety, a somewhat mocking gaiety, to study, the love of the family. If bad, it makes thin, with grimacing face, sometimes hunchbacked, and in those cases full of malice, to incline to error, to superstition. to lying, to envy. The influence of Mercury produces intermittent fevers, stammering, convulsions, catarrhs, certain diseases of the mind such as worries, manias, madness. Metal, mercury. Plants, fir, valerian, chamomile. Perfume, benzoin. Talismanic stones, agate and jasper. Animal, the dog. Color, blue. Most sensitive part, the lungs. Jupiter. The anonymous scholar who is the author of Light of Egypt says that this planet holds the scales between Saturnian slowness and Martian haste. Its influence is beneficent. It governs the noble and generous parts of the human nature: goodwill, veneration, spirituality, hope. It symbolizes the ethereal absorption into the cosmic being, and represents accordingly the organ of smell by means of which we apprehend the most subtle atoms. Star of great magnitude, it comes in size next to Saturn. It provides what is good and compassionate in us. Its action is frank, upright, straightforward. The Jupiterian has a fine soul, honest, charitable, sincere, a high morality, humanitarian and philanthropic qualities. He has a feeling for justice, receives the gifts of sobriety, a high quality of cheerfulness, virility, sympathetic seriousness. Physiologically, he usually has chestnut hair, a high forehead, is tall, with smiling eyes, crimson lips, calm and dignified bearing, a fresh complexion, clear voice. The Jupiterians produce doctors, judges, magistrates and priests, one as for instance Aristides, Plato and many Soholas. Almost all hunchbacks, Desbaroles assures us, are under the double influence of Saturn and Mercury. Statesmen and bankers. 1. Scholars and philosophers. 2. Bear the sign manual of this good planet. Correspondences: violet, fig tree, mushroom, aloe as to perfume, sapphire, purple, tin, pig. Weak organ: the liver. The Jupiterian often sins through greediness. Physical dangers: palpitations, bad blood, for they are sanguine. As they get old, they are inclined towards stoutness, baldness. They are supposed to be lovers of sensual pleasures, what we would call fast livers, fond of festivities and banquets, and also of settled conditions, order and social conventions. A proverb says of them, they pass quickly out of poverty and puberty. If the influence is bad on account of the appearances seen later on of the planet at the moment of birth, the Jupiterian becomes proud, vindictive, a spendthrift, lustful, orgiastic. He neglects his family to pursue pleasure. Among fine Jupiterian types were Rubens and Rossini. Venus. The day of Venus has always been and still remains Friday, as everyone knows. Oh, the lovely planet of love. Happy is he who enjoys the protection of the Star of Eve, in spite of its few dangers. Venus means beauty, gentleness, charm, gaiety, seductiveness, taste for music, song and dance, harmony of the form and purity of line, playfulness, generosity and even improvidence, the desire to please, love of show, jewelry, flowers and perfumes. Franz Hoffmann says, Venus is love. In her lowest states she means blind attraction, luxurious instincts. But in her higher aspects she is the guide of artists and therapeutists. Tritely Venus leads to worldly marriages and pleasures, to amorous free unions. Proudly she leads to exalted love and sublime devotion. The Venusian has deep red lips, a pink complexion, iridescent hair, long lashes, charmingly dimpled cheeks, straight nose and smiling mouth and eyes, a soft voice. 2. But he sometimes likes the pleasures of the senses to excess, and he suffers from weakness of the body, the kidneys, and the genital organs. Venus is the planet of artists, initiates, perfumers, courtesans. For her metal she has copper, for color, red 3, for perfume, cinnamon 1. Yes, we are willing to allow that tradition foresees among the Jupiterians, doctors, judges, magistrates and priests, all honest and noble. But alas, how many would give the lie to this astral sign if we did not know that many have not followed their natural vocation, but, governed by bad influences, have accepted positions for which they were not suited, or which merely assured them a good income. J. The Venusian voice is tender, a little drawling, noble, full of charm. It becomes harsh and husky through debauch. Just as animals at the time of heat have a hoarser voice. Asterisks, do not be surprised if the correspondence as to color varies among different writers, and see on this the other remarks in the present book. For stone, turquoise. For favorite plants, the bean and the syringa. For animal, the goat. If the moon, remarks the author of the Light of Egypt, represents the astral fluid in repose, Venus represents it in action. If maleficent in a feminine horoscope, she produces debauched and venal women. Otherwise she presides at healthy pleasures, at family and friendly reunions. Unless it is strengthened by another influence, that of Venus abandons its subjects to their feelings and their desires. In man it produces effeminacy, excessive susceptibility, even intemperance and vice. The sign manual of Venus is not unlike that of Jupiter, but the former is to some extent feminine, and the latter masculine. There are few artists, says Desborolles, who are not under the influence of Venus, unless it be that their art is the result of science and not of inspiration. Saturn. Pale and slow planet, star of mourning and of curse, emblem of death and inertia, symbol of treachery and of cowardice. This is above all the star of mischief. 1. Saturn destroys, like Mars, but slowly you will remember, in mythology, Saturn devouring his children. It is the dark reaper of the babies, whom it carries off through croup, meningitis and convulsions. It is the enemy of women, whom it makes barren. It is the spirit of evil, of lying, of perfidy, of defiance, of doubt, of sadness and of neurasthenia. The Saturnian, it is said, has an appearance of sadness. His shoulders bent, body dry and long, eyes small, skin dark, chin angular, cheeks hollow, cheekbones prominent, jaws heavy, lips thin, nose hooked, a slow walk. He is taciturn, avaricious, envious, insincere, but also prudent, thoughtful, diplomatic. His virtues are, however, by no means sympathetic. 2. Saturn supplies us with monks, hermits, theologians, sorcerers, agriculturists. His color is orange, his metal lead, his perfume sulfur, his animal the camel, his stones onyx and jet, his plants aconite and cypress. The Saturnian stands in special danger of paralysis, jaundice, arthritis, deafness, trouble with the legs, varicose veins, lameness, etc. But there are Saturnians of a good type, and in them the definitions given above will sometimes give interesting results. Some of them are good occultists, become great in mathematics, and the abstract one, it will be seen farther on that the tradition which is so hard on this star must be softened, as it signifies concentration rather than curse. Asterix in Italy, the so-called jettatore thrower of the evil eye, truly corresponds to the type of Saturn. Sciences, in chemistry, in agronomy. Several musicians were Saturnians, among them Berlioz of the Romantic Symphonies. Beethoven also influenced by Mars and Mercury, Ambroise Thomas, and above all the pale, dark, avaricious, lean and marvelous Paganini. Dante was a Saturnian. The Saturnians are sometimes great gamblers, because they want to dominate chance by combinations. They are not very irascible, observes Desbaroles, are hard-working, patient, because they are slow of mind and of body. They do not like either running or jumping. They are neither very sensitive nor very voluptuous, easily remain celibate. Most of the strict priests are Saturnians, and particularly the Jesuits, who have the sadness, the asceticism, the pallor, and the love of independence of the type, and have adopted a habit black in color. Before closing, these data relative to the astrological value of the 7 planets, a synopsis of which will be found farther on in a tabulated summary. Let us mention a few more details. According to the author of The Light of Egypt, the power of Mercury corresponds to the violet ray of the solar spectrum, the power of the Sun to the orange ray, that of the Moon to the green ray, that of Jupiter to the blue, that of Venus to the yellow, that of Mars to the red, that of Saturn to the indigo. But there is on the subject of planetary chromatism another theory, that of Ely star, which may be summed up as follows. The scale of colors is given both by the rainbow, aerial prism, and by the prism, crystal rainbow. What do we see in it? First of all, 3 basic colors, red, yellow, and blue, then their complements, consisting of a color formed by the total of the other 2, namely, yellow, blue, or green, red, blue, or violet, and red, yellow, or orange. 1. The law of analogies, he adds, must guide us, and spread the colors over the 7-fold scale, just as it spreads the virtues and the vices over the metals, the faculties of the soul over the days of the week, etc. And in all classifications by 7s there is a group of 3 and a group of 4. Eliphas Levi, Lacurie, Faberdo Livit, and all the great occultists have shown us that the 3-fold gives birth to the 4-fold. The colors thus fall into a group of 3 and a group of 4. These 2 groups correspond to those of the planets. Mercury, the Sun and the Moon on the one hand. Jupiter, Venus, Mars and Saturn on the other. Asterix, the group of 3 forming the triangle, and the group 1 up to indigo. Says the author, it is outside, it is the symbol of night. Admitted. But what does he think of ultraviolet and infrared? The progress of science ought to have been taken into account. Asterix, the author has previously in fact explained, or perhaps stated rather than explained, this grouping of the planets in 3 and in 4. Of 4 the cross, the whole making up light, the experiment of the disk of 7 colors producing white light by rapid rotation is well known. We may draw up the following table, the explanation of which follows. Sun, Sunday, yellow, Moon, Monday, blue, Mars, Tuesday, orange, Mercury, Wednesday, red, Jupiter, Thursday, violet, Venus, Friday, green, Saturn, Saturday, indigo. Mercury, in fact, continues the author, is a double planet, the symbol of the order of the science of good and of evil. Its duality has given birth to two powers, that of the sun good and that of the moon evil. The sun is the reason, the moon the folly of the house imagination. These two forces lie latent in Mercury, the symbol of free will. The sun in turn gives birth to two beneficent forces, the active one of Jupiter authority, and the passive one of Venus obedience. The moon, itself contingent evil, produces active evil in conjunction with Mars' usurpation of authority and passive evil in conjunction with Saturn revolt. By tabulating these data we find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that is to say, basic colors. Yellow, positive color, light, sun. Blue, negative color, penumbra, moon. Red, intermediate color, blood, life, Mercury. Secondary colors. Violet, authority, balancing the yellow of the sun, Jupiter. Green, obedience, daughter of Mercurian liberty, Venus. Orange, color of fire, balancing the lunar blue, Mars. Indigo, darker than the penumbra, night and evil, Saturn. This explanation is somewhat daring. We leave the responsibility for it with its author and quote it simply as interesting. Mixtures of astral fluids. As we have said, no one is ever under a single astral influence. Astrology, very truthful in this respect, states fully that on the one hand we must take the dominant into account, and on the other hand the resultant. We give here a few resultants, quoting from Desbarolles, who compares the combinations of the celestial signs manual to the mixtures of colors on a palette. Saturn and Jupiter, if good, give gentleness and philosophy. Further, the sun adds to all the planets physical beauty and exact understanding. United to a good Mercury, Saturn brings mental and physical pleasures, even genius. If bad, the two stars produce dangerous types, for Saturn collects evil and Mercury emits it. If favorable, Mars tempers the Saturnian cowardice, turning it into prudence and courage. If unfavorable, Mars accentuates defects already strong and drives to paradox and cynicism. Venus inclines Saturnians to jealousy, to debauch. Jupiter and the Sun combined bring happiness, glory and wealth. Jupiter and Mercury produce a quick intellect, especially good doctors, honorable and honored men. But if these two are in opposition, see farther on the chapter on appearances. The results are shallow boasters, noisy and of ill repute. Combined with Mars, Jupiter gives daring tempered with wisdom, great warriors, or if evil, insolent, ferocious and rebellious types. Venus makes the Jupiterian cheerful, simple, truthful, a lover of life and of spending. The Sun strengthens the Mercurian eloquence, rectifies the lunar imagination, adds benevolence to the charm of Venus. Somewhat childish intellectuals stand under the double sign manual of Apollo and Venus, as for instance Sterne and La Fontaine. The combined good influence of Mercury and Venus produces wonderful artists. Mars and the Moon mark famous navigators, as Columbus, Lapérouse and Cook. Their evil influence corsairs. Mars and Venus favor Amritsada. We can by ourselves and after consideration multiply and resolve these combinations. See also, farther on in the chapter on physiognomy, The views on this subject of M. Paul Jaggett,